All right, everyone. We're starting our next session, so please, everyone, have a seat, get ready, because we have an amazing session in which we're going to talk about why the smartest players in sports investing are looking at women's sports at the moment. And this session is powered by the PIF, and it's playing quite a significant role in it. Next to me, to my left, is Portia Archer. You're the CEO of the WTA,
That's right.
all about tennis. We have Alexis Ohanian, who is the controlling, founding owner of Angel City. You're also an investor in the TGL franchise Los Angeles Golf Club. You're obviously also an entrepreneur, specifically in tech, having been the founder of Reddit. Welcome. We have Ellie Rubenstein, sorry. Ellie, you just threw me off a little bit because you're wearing a t-shirt that we will touch on a little bit later. You're the managing partner and co-founder of Manna. And then last but not least, we have Stacy Sonnenberg. Stacy, you're the managing director for Goldman Sachs for global sports finance. So we have a phenomenal panel here today. But Portia, let's start with you. You're working very closely with the PIF, and they are very focused not just on supporting financially, but going forward with purpose-led partnerships. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that from your perspective and what the impact is on tennis, but even in the world of sports more generally?
Yeah, sure. Good to be with you. We have a really great relationship with PIF, and we also have built into our DNA the purpose of empowering women. And our values around that really were in alignment with PIF. We also wanted to do something novel and groundbreaking and be as ambitious as we could. And I think the PIF Maternity Fund at the WTA is exactly that. It's been really championed by the players for some time, trying to figure out how we can support our players at a time period in their lives when they're trying to balance being at the potentially highest level in their career and having peak performance, and that also being at the same time that they may be in a period of peak fertility. And how do they sort of strike that balance between those two sometimes competing realities? So this fund really does strike a great balance. It offers our athletes 12 months of paid parental leave, which is groundbreaking and literally one of one in professional sports for women, particularly those who are self-employed or independent contractors, as our athletes are. There's also 2 months of parental leave. So if the athlete herself isn't the child bearer, or if you've been in an adoption situation, you have that leave available to you. And it's surrounded by a number of initiatives that we like to call family-focused initiatives. So it gives our athletes rankings protection so that they can go off and start their family, bond with their new child and family member, and then come back and transition into play in a healthy way. There's also opportunities to apply for grants if you want to start your family in a different way and you want to do egg freezing, other fertility treatments, that is also available. So it's really comprehensive, and our players are quite pleased. And I think it's going to inspire the next generation of athletes to sort of become interested in tennis and to know that they have the financial resources, the benefits and support around them to do that in a healthy way.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and I can totally agree with this. It's amazing when athletes dedicate their lives to a sport and a career, but to be allowed to dedicate their life to life as well on the side and not to have that become a secondary thing is very meaningful. Aside from my full-time job as your moderator here today, I'm also the Chief Investment Officer at Golf Saudi, and I can tell you we have a similar program where the PIF Global Series that is backing us, again the PIF being very active, is offering something very similar to the women's golfers, where we go around the world from Korea to here in Riyadh, starting in February, to the United States, to the UK, and ending in Shenzhen, China, where our next tournament is actually next week. So we're off to that. We're doing the exact same thing, and the impact compared to other sports assets is quite impactful. Alexis, you are an investor. You believe in a thesis of sports. Not necessarily always sports you know and play yourself. You're an investor in golf, and you clearly have an investment thesis by that. But obviously, Angel City being a prime women's soccer asset in the NWSL. Tell me, what has been your thesis with this, and do you see differences between investing in men's sports assets versus women's sports assets in terms of the nature of the fans, maybe, and financials?
Let me also start out by saying I love the fact that 5 years after resigning from Reddit, a company I co-founded and very proud of, everyone's talking to me about this next big thing. And women's sports was something, it was literally the second thing I did after leaving Reddit was, founding Angel City as the founding control owner. And my whole thesis was actually tweeted. You can still find it on X. I went viral, and for the wrong reasons. I basically laid out a vision for why women's sports should be worth billions of dollars, why teams in the NWSL in particular were wickedly undervalued. A team had just sold for $3.5 million. And there was an athlete playing on that team, Megan Rapinoe, who had already transcended the sport. I didn't follow the sport, but I was aware of her. And she was worth at least that much money in marketing value alone. And this was the year of the Women's World Cup, which is a really big deal in the United States. Tier 1 brands, Tier 1 audience. My thesis was simple. These athletes are superstars once every 4 years, and then they disappear. What happens to them? And by the end of this tweet thread, I said, I'm going to start a team or buy a team. One day it's going to be worth billions. Now, I went viral, mostly because people on X were dunking on me, saying, you're an idiot, stick to tech, no one cares about women's sports, you're going to lose all your money trying to go woke, you're going to go broke. And needless to say, I have fed on their tears. Angel City is now nearly a $300 million franchise, the most valuable women's soccer team in America. I paid $1 million for that expansion fee. A group in Denver most recently paid $150 million for an expansion fee in the same league 4.5 years later. And it's not for any reason other than these athletes are superstars. They just deserved the investment in the platform this whole damn time. And so I do look at men's sports. Obviously, I was an investor in TGL, and I bought the first team in that league, LA Golf Club, like you said. My first request to the team was, how soon can we get women? So I really did it only as a way to eventually get a women's team in the TGL, which, no spoilers, but could be coming soon. And I just think in any of these formats outside of tennis, and yes, I'm married to Serena Williams, tennis is the prime example of what happens when you have equal investment. You're then able to court excellence. That's the only reason 2 girls from Compton decided to play tennis, was because they could get paid, right? And so because of that pay equity, you got excellence. Because of that excellence, you got athletes that brought the sport of tennis to a much bigger audience, much bigger than it's ever been, and the legacy exists to this day. So if tennis, why not soccer? Why not golf? Why not women's volleyball, which was my latest move? Why not track and field? So very excited to be building here, and it's been deeply rewarding financially, but also spiritually. It feels so good to be winning in a way that aligns with values.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, what you're saying is going from 1 million expansion fees now to 150 million expansion fees and so on and so forth. Those are venture-like returns, but you can argue that's really been a mispriced asset,
Absolutely.
right? Right?
Absolutely right. And like I said, check the tweets. I mean, there were a lot of people from the broader internet, but even from the investment community, that all said I was an idiot. And it's a shame, because I think hindsight will prove that most of the lack of success in women's sports historically is really just a legacy of sexism, racism, and even just business incompetence. Yeah. And at the end of the day, one of the things I love about the free market is if you can build something demonstrably great, you just win and drop the mic. You don't have to justify it anymore. You don't have to say, well, I don't care if you don't think women's soccer is as interesting as men's. Ball don't lie. In this case, revenue don't lie. And it feels wonderful.
Awesome. I'll have some follow-ups on that for you later.
Great.
But Ellie, great to see you here as well. And before we jump in, you are a co-owner of a WNBA franchise, which is a very, very hot league at the moment, with some mega stars in the making and already out on the court. But you're wearing a very specific T-shirt here that I was saying was throwing me off. It says, "Everyone watches women's sports," which is, by the way, an amazing company that I think we both have a connection to, as I was an investor in it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
All right, well, shout out to Alex Morgan and several female athletes that one of the reasons I call myself an accidental sports investor. This is actually not my primary job. A year ago, I was approached by would I join a WNBA expansion team in Austin, Texas, led by a very prominent African-American former WNBA player, one of the most famous in UT history, and she was trying to build basically an all-women sports ownership group. I said, of course, I know nothing about basketball, but I'm in. And I didn't even know where I was going to come up with the money, to be honest. But I found myself staying awake until 1:32 in the morning digging in. And every time I dug in, I thought, this doesn't really make sense. But there's something off here, and there's something like the mega trend that we're not really talking about. And I explain that because I run and I help build one of the largest consumer investment firms called Manna. And it's a firm that I'm very proudly will say we have 840 million of AUM in 7 years. 70% of the team is women, 20% of the LPs are women. And we're in brands. And why I bring all of this up is that I come to it, while I may have a consumer investment firm, I was a former athlete, nowhere near your wife, but I was also in a sport called ski racing and downhill ski racing, where I was lucky enough to have Peekaboo Street that I met when I was a little girl and Lindsey Vonn, and I thought, I can be fast like them. And in today's world, for the younger generation, they need women like Alex Morgan or your wife that they can look up to and say, this is not about sports. This is how can I achieve my own goals? And what I was finding was in order to do that in the WNBA, and again, I came at it from knowing nothing. 75% of this is media, 25% of this is sponsorship and ticket sales. And what does that mean? The sponsorship parts, what was most interesting was they were my brands, because my brands are for female consumers. They are the hottest kombucha brands, cottage cheese brands, vitamin brand. And so when you look at how do you have economic pay and equality for everyone, it's exactly what I had to do at my firm, Manna. Female athletes need to be paid. Then you also need to have sponsorships, individual and team level. You need to have fans. And so what I would tell you all is when I walked into, and I had never been to a Liberty game, right? We are, a year ago when I entered the team, we are the 2024 WNBA champion. So I was really lucky to join an unbelievable ownership group. I'm a minority investor, joined with an incredible group of women that was really building something that I stood for, which was women need to have practice facilities of their own. You may say to a mostly male audience, how could you not have your own practice facility? But when you're talking about these things, it shocked me in the way that consumer investing, there were very few consumer investors, even though the companies are mainly purchased by women consumers. So I looked at it from the sports adjacent market, and you need people like your wife, an ardent tech investor like you, people like Alex Morgan starting media companies, not just to have NIL, but media companies to get the word out. So that's why I did it. And I will say, sort of one season in, I have almost doubled down on it. And my view now is not just everybody's watching women's sports, but what I find is you are more likely to see me enter a men's sport because they need the mindset of innovation on how to build better brand activation and fan activation to have the loyalty of what you're seeing in women's sports, which frankly feels more like a Taylor Swift concert where people are unified versus a male game that's already been around. So it's the disruption and the cult feeling where I would say women's sports feels to me more like a mega trend than just the actual women's sports.
It absolutely is. And so what we've learned is that obviously smart investments with purpose into sports can have a big impact, that there's untapped value obviously and an alpha to be discovered from mismatching how assets are priced, real consumer demand. And Stacy, you being the head of global sports finance at Goldman Sachs, you have a very good overview of what the sports world is currently doing and where it's headed. So what is your view on the development of the asset value in women's sports? Do you see a lot of untapped value versus the more mature men's leagues and teams that are out there?
So I think that the most important thing to appreciate about women's sports, first of all, is just the athleticism on the pit, on the field, on the court, is as good, if not better in some cases, than the men's sports. You often hear about the purity of the game in women's sports, a little bit less acting in women's sports.
That's true. They don't flop. They don't flop.
Makes it a lot of fun to watch, right? The other thing that I was fortunate enough to get to do is I attended the first record-breaking attendance game for women's football in Europe at FC Barcelona. And what was incredible, 98,000 people coming to watch a women's football match, which was amazing. But what I was really struck by were the dads and daughters coming to the match together, and just that opportunity for dads to bond with their daughters in another way. That's meaningful. But in terms of, and I think my microphone doesn't let me, in terms of women's sports and the investment thesis, I'm inundated with phone calls from family offices, from private equity firms who only want to talk about women's sports in a world where there are tons of male sports opportunities for investment as well. And a lot of it is derived from just the pure numbers. Viewership numbers for the WNBA have grown by close to 60% since 2023, versus the NBA, which has seen a slight decline in viewership over the last couple of years. Sponsors want to sponsor women's sports. They want to be a huge participant in that space. So when you think about the 3 pillars of revenues that Ellie just talked about, media, sponsorship, and then game day, they're all growing at huge rates, which is why valuations have gone from $1 million to $250 million in the NWSL, and the same performance in WNBA, and frankly in the WSL. So we're really seeing that growth. That's what investors are responding to.
Yeah.
And Ellie, I see you nodding what Stacy was saying.
The father-daughter pair is so relevant here. I don't know I would have entered a women's sport. My father bought the Orioles a year and a half ago. And I said, great, can we have some healthy food? I don't drink, I don't want beer, I don't want chicken nuggets. And he looked at me and he said, not really the right consumer for Baltimore. I said, you know what, Dad? I'm going to do my own team then. And I don't think he took me seriously. But I'll tell you, when I took that attitude to the women's sports, I said, can we have some healthy food? And I walk into the Liberty on day one. There you have alkaline water, you have Carbone. So it's become an entertainment destination and brands that speak to me. You walk out and you get lipstick because they have a 7-figure deal with Fenty. Yeah. I was like, this is incredible. We have a glam cam up there. And I finally took my dad to a game. I said, all right, Dad, I'm gonna bring you Frank courtside. We're gonna watch Caitlin Clark, even though she was injured. And he was in shock. He actually left at halftime because it was more of a dance concert than it was a boring baseball game. And I hope that it kind of brings him, how do you bring that excitement back? But I mention this because I know specific to Saudi, you know, it's not really told as to why Yasser is in sports. He got into golf because his daughter started golfing. And as somebody who was a ski racer, and my father has never skied, he famously brought a yellow book that said, Learn Skiing for Dummies. And my mom said, you know, you're not going to learn skiing from a book. You need to go to the mountain and watch your daughter. And I will tell you, this summer, I had the most heartwarming experience that gave me hope for women's sports outside of the WNBA, because a lot of people are putting money into other sports. This summer in Texas with the floods, I went to a women's softball game about a week after the floods. Girls had lost their homes, and entire softball teams of women ages 8 to 12 showed up with their coaches. And there they were in the heat of Texas in July, sitting there, because it gave them hope. And so I think so much of this, that when you go to the games today, you'd be surprised who the audience is. It's not a 44-year-old woman. It's fathers with young kids that want something to get behind.
And they don't want more of the same, right?
No.
And that's exactly what you're describing. It's a new experience, it's a new form of entertainment, it's a new form of competition, and there's new stars in the making. So Portia, you're seeing this. Revenues are going up, they're soaring. You're doing well with sponsorships. You're creating real superstars around the world. Tell us a little bit about where the ride is going to go for the WTA going forward.
The ride is going to continue to go up. I mean, we have our first women's tennis event here in Saudi Arabia with our finals. The first edition of that was last year. The second edition is this year.
When is it this year?
It starts on Saturday, November 1st through November 8th.
Okay.
And it is the elite 8 of our sport, the top 8 women's singles players, the top 8 doubles teams. And these are not the stars of the future. These are the stars of today. Next is now. And that's only going to continue to grow. The level is going to continue to grow. We're trying to catch up with the GOAT. I don't know that we can do it, but we can aspire to do that. So.
And the PIF is a big supporter of this, and a major investor in the world of sports, and doing it much differently than many of the other private equity firms that have done it. But Alexis, you're saying there will be a billion-dollar women's sports franchise sooner rather than later. I see no doubt in your mind. How do you see this coming about, since mostly it has been media value, but we see so many different revenue streams that Ellie was describing?
I mean, I said this would happen 5 years ago. 5 years in now, I've even more conviction. It's not a question of if, it's when. Yeah, look, the media deals in the WNBA are very strong relative to other women's sports because, you know, there's the aura of the NBA. And the process, I mean, the women are amazing. The growth has been phenomenal. The numbers are better than the NWSL. But from a dollar value standpoint, what I love about emerging leagues is they are built to not take for granted that media deal. So, you know, in men's sports, you kind of, you've enjoyed media being the primary source of revenue for a long time, which means the muscles you have to exercise every day to generate revenue are just very different with emerging sports. And for women's sports in particular, you have so much more value to create. As you said, you know, you're speaking to an audience that's actually ready to purchase because the women of the household tend to do all the household purchasing. So even when you're watching an NFL game, you're watching car ads in America, pharmaceutical ads, CPG ads. They're not targeting the men in the house. And then when you talk women's sports, you can now bring in fashion brands and beauty brands, like you said, that don't spend money on the men's side. So I think the brand dollar is going to keep growing. And as those dollars keep growing, again, ball don't lie, that revenue makes it even more valuable for the next media deal and the next media deal. So I am so much more confident in where this can grow because the women's audience is not gifted to you every Sunday because you know everyone's tuning in for NFL. The women's audience has to be fought for every minute on social media so that you earn the right for them to pay attention when they're actually playing. And the good news is women athletes, far more competent, capable, way better storytellers on social. And again, as the internet guy, that stuff all compounds. And so I think the outlook is very bright. I hope Chelsea Women is the first billion-dollar team. I think the New York Liberty...
I'm going to challenge that.
If I'm being honest...
I'm going to challenge that. It'll be the Liberty.
I think the Liberty will be.
Because the W is pulling everybody up.
Yeah.
And
I think
so
it's going to be the Valkyries.
Well, you know, our former head of revenue.
Look, at the end of the day, look, we're in the middle of, you know, the MLB World Series. Go look at it. Our company, Health Aid, has cans, Dodgers cans. Go look at the women, even in the MLB. But why I say that is my own father said in his lifetime, and he's 76, women's sports will not make money. And I disagree because the advantage of the WNBA is most of it is 42% owned by the NBA. This is known. But you really do have to work together with the male NBA owners that play in these larger venues. So while NWSL, they have profitable teams, the W is pulling everybody up. And so I think that this is where it excites me, is we need gender balance. We need to work with the NBA owners. We need to do this because it pulls the NWSL, the tennis up. And so I hope somebody can go find my father and say, this will happen in his lifetime.
I think we'll all find your father. But Stacy, maybe the last word over to you before we wrap up.
Oh, so I was just going to say to your dad, most men's teams don't make money yet.
Thank you.
You know, I think the reality, and maybe just the dose of reality, I think women's sports in terms of valuation certainly have upside even today because their multiples, their valuation multiples are lower relative to the men's sports in the same category of sports. There's room to grow today even. But I would also say this is a period of investment. So this is not going to happen overnight. I think I appreciate what your father is saying. I do think that there will be, is it 5 years, is it 10 years, is it 15 years, time horizon where the women's sports are profitable in the same way men's sports are today, which is still many of the teams are not individually profitable.
But look, we're all chasing the WTA when it comes to revenue. Again, ball don't lie. Anyone who got on stage and said women's tennis is not as serious a sport or not as real a sport or whatever as men's sport would be literally laughed out of a room because they would look so stupid.
Absolutely.
Right? And so why is that? Because, again, ball don't lie. The revenue is there. The viewership is there. Like, there's your case study.
You have to look at it, to your point. I tell people this is venture philanthropy, and it's truly replaced my philanthropic dollars other than the rodeo, because I think the rodeo has been one of the greatest sports causes I've gotten behind, but it's a nonprofit in most regards. But you have to look at it like that because it's really been one of the best community and economic drivers where you write a check once and then it continues to grow. Not they come back to you every year for money, and you see the social multiplier of it. So that's why I almost say in some ways it's really better for people as a personal investment. And I would encourage anybody that's saying maybe I'm not seeing my economic return in philanthropy to go look at it in sports, because that's really where you're going to say you have to take a long bet, but you're going to be far happier with how you use those dollars.
And by the way, rodeo is something that I'm not hearing for the first time here today. There might be something coming to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure yet, but it has been brought in the same context here, which is highly exciting. But if I can take one thing away from this panel today, very smart investors, believing in women's sports, but really being extremely passionate about it. And to see that passion doesn't just happen because you're making money with this, right? The passion comes because it's an exciting sport and exciting to watch. So I really encourage everybody to come to our PIF Global Series and watch it. We're going to be Shenzhen next week, and then next year we're coming back to Riyadh. Watch the WTA finals here in Riyadh. Go see an Angel City game. Go see a Liberty game. And please follow the money where Stacy is going, because those are the next
We all
big
need
trends.
her.
Thank you so much, everybody, and hope to see you again here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.